sad day for South Africans as the country continues to mourn the death of former apartheid struggle stalwart and human rights lawyer George Bizos. His family says he died peacefully at his home yesterday. He was 92. For more on this now, I'm joined on the line by his second son, Professor Damon Bizos. Professor, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM report. So, he's been lauded as a big giant, a legal eagle by the president's own terms. Perhaps let's start by understanding who George Bizos was to you.
So, morning, Ayanda, and morning to all the listeners. And I'd first of all just like to thank everyone for their condolences and thoughts at this very difficult time. And I'd also like to thank all of those who helped to care for him. The doctors at Donny Gordon, at North Park Hospital, and the palliative care team that helped us keep him at home and keep him comfortable in his last hours. He was a wonderful man, and he came from very humble roots, and I think he never forgot that. And people were always amazed how much time he had for everyone. He regarded everyone equally, and he fought injustice to others. With everything he had. Injustice to him he didn't mind, but injustice to others, especially the vulnerable, was something that really spurred him on to greater heights. And his legacy really was in numerous spheres. The first thing I'd like to say is, as a family man, I couldn't have wished for a better father. I don't think our family couldn't have wished for a better father. He loved our mother undyingly for all of his marriage, and we thank him for that. And he really was heartbroken when she passed away 2 years ago. He led by example as a family person. He was the most honest person I have ever met, and told it how it was, but really led by example. He would never ask us to do things that he wouldn't do himself. Come from a humble background and came from a Greece that was really being threatened by the fascist Italian and Nazi regimes. He, at a young age, saw injustice, and I think that if you read his book, Odyssey to Freedom, he points out how that shaped him as he went through life. And he never forgot his roots. His mother was an illiterate olive farmer. His father was the mayor of the village. And I'm sure that if they had not escaped both, certainly his father would not have survived the war. So, as a family man, he managed to spend quality time with his family, mostly on a Sunday and during holidays. The rest of the time, he was working flat out until often 11 o'clock at night, and how he managed to balance his life between representing people who had been charged by the apartheid government, setting up Saheti School at the time. I just don't know where he found that time, but he managed during his busy schedule to do that. And then gradually he helped to set up and run the Legal Resources Center, which ensures that those who cannot afford legal representation, especially when they are of public interest, that their cases are taken free of charge. And so all of those, he managed to merge all of those while at the same time ensuring that the family kept together, and his love for us three sons and our children and his grandchildren was really amazing to see. And he could spend time with us despite the fact that he was in such demand. We understand that he was a public figure, and people would try to spend as much time as they could, and he was someone who we had to drag away from whatever public event it was. I don't think he ever said no to a invitation, no matter to where it was. He never said no to a cocktail party. It was often the last to leave. And so in the latter years, when his health started to have issues, it was difficult to control his enthusiasm and
Right.
And he's one to be with the public and to continue his work as a lawyer. And we really are fortunate that we had him for 92 and a half years, and he continued to work until he was 91. And it was then only the last few months that his health failed him. And but we thank the Lord that he really had those many years with us, and that we could share him with the South African public. And I hope that his example will be taken on by others, where you live your life according to your philosophy and principles. People who espouse one thing and do other things, I find a little difficult to stomach. And he was someone who lived his whole life according to his principles.
Right. And, what an unconventional man he also was. I mean, here he was at the height of apartheid as a white male in this country, taking the political position that he took, which was to, of course, fight against the system. I wonder what bearing that had on your upbringing and the type of values that you ended up espousing along with your siblings as you also came to grips with what's actually happening in the country.
So he always did what was right, and as you know, often to do the right thing is the more difficult path to take. And that was inculcated into him when he was in Greece. And the Greeks were the first to say, were one of the first countries to say no to the Axis powers, and they suffered a heavy price. And so he didn't mind what happened to him, and he obviously was careful in what he did. And I think the ANC tried to ensure that he stayed out of the line of fire so that he could use his best weapon, which was his legal brain, and he managed to do that. When we were younger, he protected us. He really protected us as a family. He tried not to involve us, and he let us choose our own paths. And we learned from him. We were very proud of him. We understood that at that time he was not popular amongst the majority of the white population. And it's been gratifying to see that a lot of them have changed their attitude and mind about what happened during apartheid. I still think there are a lot of people who haven't, but when he did things, he did it because it was right. He didn't think about the consequences necessarily, and he really didn't care about what other people thought about him, as long as he knew that what he wanted to do was correct. And he was the greatest optimist that I knew. He always looked at the positive, and the fact that he set up a school at a time when everyone thought it was impossible, and 4 or 5 previous attempts had failed, that he managed to get a team together. And I must say that he always worked with a team. But as an advocate, he often would finally make the decisions and take the consequences of those decisions. And I think that that's what he did in his legal life, that's what he did in his family life, and that's what he did when he was setting up Sehezi School.
Right. Speaking about his family life, I remember reading that he's actually quite the cook too. Firstly, are you able to confirm this, your own experience? Did Dad whip up a storm in the kitchen?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say, he could cook. I think his greater legacy was his famous vegetable garden. In the 1960s, his mother came out to live with us in our house in Parktown North, which really stayed much the same since it was built in 1960. But there was a small patch of the garden behind the rockery that he set up as a vegetable garden for our grandmother. She couldn't speak a word of English, but she could farm vegetables, so she started that off. And then when she decided to go back to Greece, but she wasn't going to die in a city in a suburb in South Africa, she went back and farmed in Greece. He took over that vegetable garden, and it just grew and grew. And he used it as a place where he could think. He would wake up very early and get into the vegetable garden, and often would be working through what he had to say in the courtroom that day, or working through whatever problem it was. And so it was an area where he could have some solitude and think. I mean, so his vegetable garden was renowned. He could cook and cook well, often very basic type cooking, but wonderfully delicious. And he was most famous for his lamb on the spit. So if you want to, you can go to the internet and look up his recipe. And it really is the most wonderful lamb. And often we would have lambs on the spit for his friends, for family friends, and for his legal colleagues. And they were times of great feasting and times for people to talk. And there was often lots and lots of legal and political talk, and we grew up with that all around us.
Absolutely. And of course, no bias at all in your reviews. Thanks very much for your time and for coming on to the AM Report. Once again, condolences to you and your family. Professor Damon Bizos is one of 3 sons of George Bizos, paying tribute there to his father. Thanks very much indeed for your time.